Hi, my name is Racaut. I'm a lecturer in history at Newcastle University, and today I want to talk to you about the role that the European wars of religion played in national identity in England and France. Historians in the past have considered the English Reformation to have taken place in isolation from the events that took place in the rest of Europe on the continent. What I want to do today is to compare the English Reformation, which should be familiar to you, with events that took place in France, which are perhaps less familiar. The point of the comparison is to highlight the fact that England's situation during the 16th century, between 1500 and 1600, may not have been as unique as it was previously thought. You may be familiar with the story of the Tudors and how they freed England from the yoke of Roman Catholicism, Henry VIII and his wife's, an historical Bluebeard. The great matter of his divorce from Catherine of Aragon is only part of the story. To quote the great British comedian Eddie Izzard, "That's no basis to start a religion on." The story of how Protestantism, born out of Luther's rebellion against papal indulgences in Germany in 1517, and how it made its way into England is more complicated and requires a longer explanation. The comparison with France here is not surprising as it might seem at first. Indeed, France had gone through a conflict with Rome, very similar to that of Henry VIII, except that it had taken place about 100 years before, in 1438. Unlike England, however, the conflict that gave rise to the freedom of the Gallican Church from Rome could not possibly have been Protestant, simply because it had taken place years before the advent of the Protestant Reformation. To this extent, the French National Church, the Gallican Church, as it was called, that was born in 1438, could be compared to the English National Church that is first mentioned as Anglicana Ecclesiae in the Magna Carta of 1215. In fact, the idea of national churches independent from Rome predates the Reformation by about 500 years, with the conflict that opposed the Holy Roman Emperor and the Pope at the turn of the first Christian millennium, around the year 1000. It concerned whether the control of the Church, in practical terms the right to appoint bishops, should be in the control of the Emperor, who wielded political power in Central Europe, or the Pope, who claimed universal spiritual authority over the whole of Europe. The conflict exported itself to England and led to the murder of the great advocate of papal power in England, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Becket, at the hands of the English king's men in 1174. It also exported itself to France slightly more successfully and led to the removal of the seat of papal power from Rome to Avignon in southern France between 1305 and 1377. The culmination of the ongoing struggle between the French kings of Rome was the pragmatic sanction of Bourges of 1438 that gave the French Church effective independence from Rome, although it still recognized the Pope as head of the Church. Henry VIII's Act of Supremacy of 1534 achieved nothing less for the English Church, with the important difference that it also replaced the Pope as head of the Church with the English monarch. The dissolution of monasteries and gentries that followed Henry's Great Matter, arguably inspired by Protestantism, also gave the Tudors financial control of the Church's land and revenues, no more than had been achieved by the French a century earlier. At the beginning of the 16th century, the French king, Francis I, claimed more control over the French Church with the Concordat of Bologna in 1516, which provoked strong opposition from Gallican thinkers. The rights of the Gallican Church were reformulated and are summarized here by the French jurist Pierre Pitou in 1594. The first, that a pope can neither order nor command anything, be it general or particular, concerning worldly things in the country, and lands falling under the obedience and sovereignty of the very Christian king. The second, that although the Pope is recognized as sovereign in things spiritual, in France nonetheless, absolute and infinite power has no place, but is retained and limited by the canons and rules of the previous councils of the Church received in this kingdom. The rise of Protestantism in Germany that took place from 1517 onwards, therefore, was less likely to take hold in France than in England. Indeed, there was no need for the French Church to ascertain its financial independence from Rome, which it had already achieved. or to challenge the Pope's spiritual authority as Henry VIII has done. But Gallicanism was so strong that Henry II, the French king, inspired by the English example, briefly considered breaking from Rome in 1551. In the end, his Gallican advisors, who wanted to avoid schism from Rome, which is not the same thing as political independence, convinced the king not to go through with it, arguing that it would encourage Protestantism to take hold as it had done in England. Cardinal du Bellay would have said at the time, "Even if the intention of the king is not to leave the authority of the Church, but only from its minister the Pope, it is obvious what would happen in the end. The beginning in England was slow, even slower than what is considered here, but the consequence was such that can be seen now." The Gallican crisis of 1551 demonstrate that it was possible for the French kings to break from Rome, which is not the same thing as embracing Protestantism. The fact that France did not follow England in the end is only an accident of history.